I'm just messing with you.
Oh, you already. I almost hit end stream because of that. You rascal.
Oh, sorry.
I've been the shortest fireside chat of all time. Hello, everybody, and welcome to very fun and very deep. Oh, let's go deep fireside chat on this lovely Monday. Lovely, depending on where you are, but lovely's a mindset if we can choose that. So it's a lovely Monday for everyone. Yeah, hello Sarah, hello David, hello Robert, welcome. In this fireside chat, well, first of all, if you're new to fireside chats, they are just live events where we pick a topic and we just casually chat about it as if we were by a fireside that's not actually lit. And it's just a casual conversation where we welcome all the input from people watching as well, or anyone who watches this afterwards. Feel free to leave comments and whatnot, but it's just a laid back conversation where we hope to bring our expertise, experience, knowledge to a particular topic. And so this time around, we are doing why do we write? And we're going to go with the actual we're all going to explain why we write, but also just talk about why people write in general and why we're all together in this creative pursuit that is exciting most of the time and horrible sometimes. So why do we do this to ourselves?
Well, my first why question, though, is why is your fireplace not lit, Doug? I feel like it's cold.
Oh, yeah, it's freezing. And I'm in my basement. It's cold down here. First, I want to say hi to Athena and Mizelle, too, for dropping in. No, my fireplace isn't lit because one spring I'm like, ooh, let's save, 50 cents on gas by cutting the gas to the pilot light, and I haven't been able to relight it since.
Oh,
so that's why.
No
No judgment. All right. So as we go through this, I do encourage everyone who's here with us, just if you feel inspired to do so, let us know why you write and what's the purpose behind your writing. Before we dive too deep into it, Abby, Hank, how are we doing today?
I'm lovely. Welcome everyone to Fireside Chats, aka Hot Take Mondays. Hope that you'll share some of your hot takes with us as well.
We have had some pretty spicy takes in some of these. So this one, I think this will be more like emotional, more personal.
I was going to say,
than hot ones. Yeah, Abby prepared us that she might cry. So.
Oh, I've got my tissues right here. So. Sorry, everybody. I feel like I have to explain my background. My husband has told me I can't live stream from the living room anymore because nobody likes to walk behind me. So I was banished to a new office. I mean, I'm really not sad about it because I'll probably never leave this space. I'm here, but it is empty and disheveled at the moment. Made it as far as I could.
When you said you were banished, I got this picture in my mind of your husband and all of his red hair, red bearded glory, banishing you like Zeus from Mount Olympus or something. But he just went to another room.
No, really, I think he knew that secretly I wanted this office. I built it for him, and then I was like kind of sad that I didn't claim it for myself, and I think he knew that, and so he's trying to like nicely say that I can have it by banishing me. And for everybody at home, my husband looks just like Doug, to be honest. So it's always funny. My kids saw Doug on the computer for the first time, and they walked by. They're like, "What's Dad doing?" Oh, it's not Dad. That's not Dad.
All right, now for this fireside chat, I brought this idea to my fellow host here a little bit ago, and specifically, I was inspired, and I can't remember if I said this to you too, but I was inspired by a couple things that just made me realize that for as much honestly garbage as I see on like Netflix and stuff, just pushed out on a regular basis. I watched the latest season of Arcane, the show, and the art in it made me go, wow, like they're pushing boundaries, they're experimenting, they are clearly passionate about this show, and it really, really shows. And then I went and saw the Lion King musical, and I told you too about my experience there and how much I loved it. And I'm like, there's clearly passion and creativity behind this musical. It was so cool. I got chills at certain parts. And so I thought, okay, well, we want to bring the same kind of energy to our writing. And I think every writer wants to do that, but why do we want to do that? What's the kind of the purpose behind our writing? And really, I then kind of, a couple weeks ago, we did our goal setting, or our goal workshop for here on YouTube, for everyone to join. It wasn't a premium workshop this time around. And in that, I encourage people to what I call the dig deeper exercise, which is where you say what your goal is. And in one case, I say, I want to write a horror novel, or I want to finish the first draft of my horror novel this year. Right? And then you say, why is that important to me? Well, I want to start building a backlist. Why is that important to me? I want to grow my author platform and reach new readers. Why is that important to me? Boom, 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 right? And eventually you drill down to this big why, this ultimate goal. And for me, it's so that I can live a life doing the thing that I want to do, entertaining people and feeling fulfilled while I do it, right? It's ultimately fulfillment. And we'll dig deeper into my why in a little bit. But those three things kind of came together to inspire this Fireside Chat. And so that's kind of why we're here. I'm going to say why a lot in this Fireside Chat, I think. But for you two, have you ever like consciously sat back and thought, oh, this is why I'm writing? Or has it always just kind of been there? We'll start. How about Abby? You go first.
Oh, okay.
Beth says hi, by the way.
Oh, I know. Hi, Beth. I love Beth. I'm so happy she's here. All right. So, gosh, like, how do I even start this? When I first started writing, I figured out pretty quickly that I was no good at it. Like, I thought I was good at it, and I realized very quickly I just didn't know what the heck I was doing. So I ended up working with a writing coach, a book coach, and her favorite word was why, by the way. So, I mean, everything was like, why? Why does the character say this? Why would the character do that? You know, why? But she always made you sit down. Every writer that she worked with, she would sit down at the beginning, and you had to answer a bunch of questions before you started writing. And her biggest one is like, why are you the best person to write this book? Why are you writing? And I have to admit that, 7 levels deep sort of activity was like not my jam. So pretty much I sat down and I gave her the answer that I think most people would give, right? Which is like, well, I don't want to die without having written a book, right? Which is like inherently, I think, kind of dark to begin with. And I am not a dark person. I mean, look at this. I just painted pink. I'm in my office. I am not a dark person, right? But anyway, I kind of gave this like kind of static answer, right? And here I am, I'm writing this kids book about a magic library, and like Mr. Toad is in it. Like, it was like totally this fan fiction sort of book anyway, right? And Mr. Toad does all this wacky stuff, and my characters do all this wacky stuff, and there's all this humor in my book, and it's aimed at middle grade kids. So it's like ages 8 to 12, right? So I get about partway through the first draft of this book, right? And I hit that same spot that I think a lot of people hit, where it's like, you think, like, I'm not doing this right. I'm not good enough. Like, I'm not going to be able to finish this book. I was like, rrr. And she stopped and she started asking me questions, right? To really try and pull the real why out of me. And I ended up telling her the story that when, just before I got married, my best friend passed away right after childbirth, right? And you think, like, in today's day and age, when does that happen? Like, we don't die of childbirth. And, I guess it was like early 2000s at that point. Like, that's something that you think of, like, the pioneers would die of or whatnot. But she passed away as a result of childbirth and left behind her this beautiful newborn baby, right? And so fast forward a few years, I'm now married. I have little babies in my arms, right? And I start thinking about writing. And when I sat down to write these stories that were fun and light and energetic, really what was in me is like, what if I die and I leave my babies behind? And like her, I never got to tell them all the important things about life. So I'm sorry, Hank. I told you. And we laughed because of that podcast episode. And I could go and dig it up. where she was asking me this live on a podcast, by the way, Hank. And so here I end up this blubbering mess that we captured, right? And we called the episode "It Always Goes Dark," because we feel like in a lot of ways, it doesn't matter what it is that you're writing, you have this kernel inside you of something that's like really like fueling that fire that keeps you going. And once I realized why I was doing it, I have never been able to walk away from writing since then. I mean, I've got 6 books sitting on my computer that I've yet to have an agent pick up, right? Which is like, okay, half-heartedly pitched. So that's on me, but it's kept me going because I know I want my kids to realize, and every one of my books is about being a weirdo and accepting that you're a weirdo. So, I mean, right here, but I think that kind of coupled with this idea that I want my kids to see me chasing a dream and not giving up, even though it's hard. It's hard. And I've been rejected, enough times that most people would walk away from it. And I'm not, and I'm still going. And I think that's a good lesson for my children, not just to read the words that I'm putting on the page, but to see my actions as well. And so, that's what gets my butt in the chair every morning. And Hank, now you get to follow that act.
Well, I was going to say, we'll actually cut the show there because we cannot follow that.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Will. But no, as some folks in the chat are saying there, thanks for that positive attitude and thanks for sharing that, because Hank and I were unaware of that as well, right? This is the first time you shared it with us too. So thank you.
That was beautiful. And I have nothing to everything I was gonna say just sounds so trite and
but it's not, Hank.
Yeah. So. Yeah. No, I the reason I started writing, I grew up on a farm way out in rural Mississippi, and the school I went to was so small there were 37 people in my graduating class. So that's the size of the community I grew up in. And but both of my parents were big readers and constantly, made sure books were around, and my dad was a lot of things, but one thing that he was always amazing at was he went to the bookstore all the time, and he would take me with him, and I could buy anything in the bookstore that I wanted. It never asked questions, just I could go pick up anything and he would buy it for me. And so I grew up, with books as my best friend. And, I started writing from an early age just because that's what you do. You read a lot, so you write a lot. And I never thought about being a writer per se. Writing is just what I did. And so I, have written blogs in the past. I used to write a column for our local newspaper, and just something that I always did. And one day I was talking with my wife, and I had threatened for years to write a novel. And we were sitting in the swing that we had in our front yard at the time. And we would just sit at the end. I would get off work and we would just kind of decompress to each other and, stuff. And I started telling her about this idea, this image that I had. I had woken up from a dream, and this happens to me a lot. I wake up and with these images in my head, like things that I had been processing or whatever. And I had this image of a guy who was about to commit suicide. He had the barrel of a pistol in his mouth, and all he could think about was the taste of it, like what gunpowder tastes like. And it was just such a visceral image and like a weird take on someone that had found themselves in this moment, and all they could think about was what it tasted like. It was just such an odd, so I started telling her about this, and so she just started asking me questions back and forth, and we just kind of bounced ideas back and forth. And that night I sat down and I started writing. I wrote like the first 3 chapters of who this guy was and why he found himself in this situation. And I was hooked from there. It was the first time that had intentionally written fiction. like this. I'd always written, but there was, it was me processing some thought or something. And yeah, that was like 15 years ago. So, and every day I've been chasing a story since. And for me, yeah, like that first book, it was like I was processing everything that I ever thought that I had to say about anything, and what could I possibly say after that book? Because, I had told everybody everything that I thought about everything in that book. And then, when you get to about the 80% mark, then there's like, oh, well, there's 5 other story ideas, and then, eventually I started writing because, instead of me thinking that I had something that I needed to tell everybody, maybe I had a story that would entertain and that, we might could learn something together, or it might just be fun, and writing kind of morphed into, um, something that was just it's just something that I do every day now, and it helps me from going insane.
I like that you had a fictional character hold a gun to your head to get you to start writing.
Well, right. Yeah. It was pretty wild.
What I want to dial in on for just a sec is something that you mentioned, Abby, is that if you thought about not writing, or if the idea of not writing ever popped up, you have this thing that pushes you forward and keeps you going. Like, it's unthinkable to not be writing based on your why, right? Yeah. And I think that's super important. I think that's a message that I want to kind of embed in everyone's brain. And I mentioned it in the goal setting workshop, but like, if you say, okay, I really want to write this book, that's cool. That's admirable. And I want everyone to write their book. But if you're having a bad day, or if something, negative has happened, or you slept poorly, when you go to write that day, saying, oh, I want to finish this book isn't going to get your butt in the chair when it should be, right? But thinking, oh, I want to, leave something for my family should something ever happen. Suddenly it's a heck of a lot harder to say, no, I'm not going to spend 15 minutes writing today. Right.
Well, one of the things that Jenny used to always say, so she was my first book coach, and I'd heard her say it at many retreats, because for a while I ran their community. And so we used to do this pre-pandemic, right? So we did all these like live retreats, and it was awesome. And she would always challenge the writers, and she would say to them, why would you choose to do something as gut-wrenchingly difficult as write a book? Like, why would you spend 10 years of your life maybe chasing after the first draft of that first book? Are you, it's like, what is it, sadomasochism sort of thing, right? So why would you choose this if you could just walk away? And then she would say to the writers, I'm giving you permission. Walk away. Like, you don't have to do this. And you would get this knee-jerk reaction from people, right? Like, I can't walk away from this because, and then it was that because that kind of started to get, down. And she's like, well, if you can't walk away, then I hate to tell you this, but the only way out is through. And I mean, I think that's such brilliant writing advice. It has nothing to do with writing in so many ways, but it has everything to do with writing in so many ways.
Yeah.
So.
And Hank has mentioned in a show prior to this, it's always stuck with me after you said it, Hank. If you want to make money, there are way easier ways than writing a book.
Oh yeah. So a million ways. Yeah.
So you need something more powerful, more meaningful than, hey, I just want to write a book to become famous or something.
Yeah, and that kind of brings up the issue, and we've talked about it a little bit before, that the blessing of a day job, so that the pressure is not on you because then your writing becomes something completely different, and then your whys all change, so if you can appreciate your life circumstance where it is and write for the joy of writing, and then if the joy of writing becomes a career of writing, that's wonderful, that's amazing, I salute you, but don't go into it putting all that pressure on it, because then it becomes something completely different.
Yeah.
So Doug, what's your why?
Well, I was going to say, I'm going to share mine, but I do want to highlight some of the ones that have been said already. David writes because he's read so many books that his brain is just full of words, so you need to make room for more books. I love that. Hope has always had characters and stories in your head, so I need to write it down or spend all the time daydreaming. It takes a lot of space in the brain. You want to share your life experience. I really like that last part of it there. And Sarah said, I've always wanted to find a way to express the wonder and magic that I see everywhere underneath the everyday world and share it with others. That one really resonates with me because I mean, I can see from the chat, and I know from you two and from everyone else that I've spoken to, like I adored reading from a very young age, right? And I don't think that's uncommon. But I did a lot of exploring the world when like through books and through the perspective of characters when I was younger. And it was like I grew up in rural Ontario where, you know, there's maybe not 31 kids in an entire graduating class, but like my elementary school, you know, we had like 20 kids, right? And like a big yard, but very, very small school. And so it was a way for me to kind of get to different places, whether they were real or not, and meet new people, whether they were real or not. And now that I write myself, I love sharing those experiences with other people and opening people's worlds and minds via that way. But specifically, we all know I write really dark stuff, right? Dark fantasy, horror, urban fantasy that is dark in its own right. But I always say that I write that stuff because the darker something is, when you're successful at the end, it's like all the brighter. Right. And so no matter how dark I make my books, I always try and insert some kind of hope in there that people can latch onto. Or in the case of a long series, maybe it's just a little sprinkling of hope so that when we get to the very end, then it's super bright. But that's why I write, because like it sounds kind of, I find it sounds kind of conceited when I say it, but I'm a very optimistic person, very glass half full kind of person. And I try and bring that energy with me everywhere. And so writing the super dark stuff, it fulfills me because I can then make other people's lives better.
Yeah. That's interesting that we're so the same but so different at the same time, which makes me really like it, because I'm like, no, happy, funny, like the world is dark enough as it is out there. I'm like, I want to read to escape that, but you pour yourself wholeheartedly into it as a way to escape it, which I just think is really fascinating. So.
Right? And I think it's because the more macabre something is, the worse it is, the more it pushes people, like characters in this case, and the more you can highlight how resilient they are, or how well they work together, or how people complement one another in their skills or their thinking. Like that's the kind of stuff I love writing, wrapped up in something very dreary.
Well, it's kind of it kind of puts a point on the only way through something is through it. That's the culmination of it, is that, you know, the only way to get through something is to get through it. And then Doug just tries to make it as horrific as possible.
Yeah.
He just makes it so hard.
See, and there's in dark fantasy is a subgenre, but then there's two like subgenres within it. There's grimdark, which is just depressing. It is just the worst things that can happen, and
the
barely
grimmest,
any.
The darkest.
The grimmest, the darkest is very on the nose, kind of.
Not like Grimm Brothers, but like Grimm.
No,
word.
Grimm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But then there's also the lesser known one called, I think it's called Noblecore, which is like, you know, like hardcore, but with noble instead of hard. And that's where you have these heroic things happening in a terrible situation. So I kind of find it's a goofy word, but I like it.
Who am I to judge?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not judging.
What Sarah commented a minute ago, that I've always wanted to find a way to express the wonder and magic that I see everywhere underneath the everyday world and share it with others. That sums up my writing to a T. That's like, there's always something weird in the background, just beyond what we can see and feel. And those are the kind of stories that get my motor running every day.
She summed up your writing. Beth summed up mine. I I am not kidding you. My kids make fun of me all the time because like sometimes I'll ask a question like, oh, if you could have dinner with any like literary character, who would you have dinner with? Or if you could date any literary character, who would you date? Or like, who would you marry out of like all the literary? And my answer is always Mr. Toad. And my kids are like, you would marry Mr. Toad? And I'm like,
No.
hell yeah, I would. I mean, first of all, he's got a lot of money and he's super generous. I was like, and he just wants to have fun and he is going to take you on that ride with him no matter what. I'm like, I'm in.
We ride at dawn.
We ride at dawn.
One thing I want to also point out, Hank, you said that we have like this gift of a day job, right? But if people watching this now or later, if your goal is to write full time, which I think is a very admirable goal, that's when your why kind of changes, right? So you might still have this initial one to leave something for family, or because you have these stories that need to be told, or because it's your way of processing the world. But then you tack on, it's not just writing for a career. Like, you don't do your job just for the sake of doing your job, just like you don't write for the sake of writing. If writing becomes your full-time job, you're now writing to support yourself and your family, right? In addition to your why. And I think if we take anything away from this chat, I want people to just get a little deeper with their motivations on things and understand what's actually pushing you. Metalver said, I don't know if I have an exact why. That's fine. You don't need to know it now, but I do encourage you to take some time and actually try and like get a partner, get a friend, get somebody, and kind of bounce off them, have them ask you why something's important, and just keep digging deeper until you can't find that actual why, or until you can find that actual why.
And be like an art major where you don't know until after you've done something sometimes why you did it. So
right. And let me put a finer point on what I said and what you commented on, Doug, is that sometimes your why does change, and sometimes that's a sign of growth and maturity. That just because you started doing something for a reason doesn't mean that it can't grow, and it can't grow you to another place. And maybe you want it to turn into your bread and butter and your day in, day out. And that's wonderful. And if you can see that coming and you can pursue it and you can take that to the next level, that's amazing. And we applaud you for it. Just because you decide to do that doesn't mean what you're doing every day is any less impactful, or, doesn't, grow your spirit more. All those things. Just because we attach money to something doesn't mean it's less of an artistic expression, or I didn't mean to give that impression if anybody took that way.
No, I don't think you did either. I just want you to expand into the future if somebody got there.
Yes.
Elena saying, I like to create stories and tell them in the form of my books. I tell stories about teens who have children at 18 and somehow they manage to raise them very well. I think that's an important message for sure.
Yeah.
And Beth saying, I have a strong why, wanting to see myself and my community represented in books. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, actually, Beth has a great, I think, sort of own voice spin on her books. That is
awesome. I love that.
And me too, in a way, because I grew up in a part of the country where we have very dynamic storytellers as kind of part of our culture. And some people would say that part of that is mental illness. Could be. I'm not here to judge.
We're going to embrace.
So some people, they take the mentally challenged parts of their family and they put them in a back room. In the South, we put them on the front porch and let them tell stories.
Yes, we do.
That's where, and that's
where Hank sits.
That's where I sit. And, and representing those people and those quirky, characters are kind of the hallmark of the stories I tell, because I love to, bring the weird folks that other people would laugh at and show that there's some wisdom in there. And, beneath all of the crustiness is a lot of fun.
Actually, look what Beth's saying. Writing's one of the few things, if you started as a hobby, people push you to write professionally. When she quilted, no one pushed her to do it professionally. I was getting a visual arts degree and people were constantly pushing me into education. That was like the one thing that they would say, oh, you're getting an art degree? Are you going to be a teacher? Oh, it'd make me so mad every time.
That leads to
and then I became a teacher. So
Here's a question or some food for thought. If you knew you weren't going to make a single penny from now until the day you left this earth from your writing, would you still write?
Oh, I was writing for decades before I ever saw a penny. Yes.
Sub question. If I knew I was never going to make a penny, but they would one day ban my book, would I keep writing? Yes.
Then you write furiously.
Everybody else wants to be a New York Times bestseller, not me. I want to be on the banned book list. I will feel like I have made it at that
point. I love that goal.
So
hey,
that's Abby's additional why. We know why I'm writing, but my additional why that I'm adding on is because I would like to be banned one day.
I feel like Doug and I could pitch in with you, and we could successfully get something banned.
Yes.
Between the three of us, I really think we could.
I mean, I live in Florida. I feel like it can't be that hard.
Okay, so something that I want to ask you all about. What happens if we lose sight of our why? How can we kind of remind ourselves of this deeper meaning? How can we cling to it if the going gets tough? Any advice on that?
I
really put my colleagues on the spot here.
Yeah, you did.
I'll start with a little piece of advice that's a little bit of a cop-out answer.
Okay.
I advise, I've done this inspirational exercise, the digging deeper exercise a couple times now, or mentioned a couple times now. And every time I say, when you get that why, that deeper meaning, write it down and, put it on a sticky note on your monitor. Put it, as the background of your phone, put it on your fridge or something. Write it in lipstick on your mirror, if that's still something people do. Like, put it somewhere that you can see it often, because it is really easy with the busyness of life, with a million bills to pay and stuff coming through the news cycle all the time that is just depressing to listen to. Like, it's easy to lose sight of why you're doing something that's important to you. So I encourage people to physically put a reminder somewhere so that they cannot avoid it, even if they want to.
I mean, I would say I see my children walk behind me every day, but to be honest with you, they're kind of like tweens and teens now, so they're kind of annoying, and it's not good enough. Some days not good enough. I'm like, I think they got this at this point. They're kind of weird, so we'll just let them go. Luckily, mine was strong enough. I mean, as here I am still crying about it, that I think it sits with me pretty heavily most days. And plus, I walk around constantly thinking about the stories that I'm writing. I mean, constantly, to the point where sometimes it's ridiculous how real they feel to me. Like, I mean, I mentioned briefly the pandemic earlier. When the pandemic kind of hit and everything started shutting down, and you were doing that thing where it was like, you're calling your family that lives in another part of the world. How you doing? Everything okay? What's going on? One point I've been like doing the dishes, and I turned to Sean, my husband. I was like, oh my God, I didn't think to call John Thorpe and ask him how he was doing. And he was like, Abby, that's a character from one of your books. Why would you call him? And I was like, because Hank, I'm mentally ill, right? Because I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. I thought he was real for a minute. And I was just checking in on him. It's like, so sad.
I agree. I don't know that I ever question my why, because like Abby, I'm always thinking about, there's always characters walking around in my head. There's always scenarios that I'm playing the what if game with. One thing that I've been doing recently, the last couple weeks, is I got this free write typewriter for Christmas, and I've been thinking of like every day I just try to think of some topic about writing, and I sit down and I write an essay about it, and I just off the top of my head. It's unedited. It's, got typos and all that. And I posted over on the Storycraft Cafe. And those little things have been reminding me of just little nuggets of things that I've learned from people or picked up or things I've found out for myself. And so like today I was thinking about, how do you find your voice as a writer? And I just sat down and I started kind of going through all the different exercises that I think of when I, trying to remember back when I started. How did I find my voice? What, and so little exercises like that about just thinking about the process and why I do things the way I do. And those little things help me to get back in touch with my writer brain.
Actually, being in the community with all the other writers is like the biggest thing for me. I mean, I think that's why I've gravitated towards, I tend to be a people person anyway. And I get my energy from being around other people. I am going to share a secret with you guys, though. I actually prefer being around people online than in person sometimes, which is kind of sad, I think. But
it's not sad because it's us.
It is you guys. I mean, if you guys lived close to me, I would probably be in trouble because we would be like Mr. Toad and we'd go get into some shenanigans. But no, I think going to events like this and participating in things that, are of interest to me helps keep me fueled. It gives me ideas to try new things. I love talking about writing. I could talk about writing all day long. I mean, you guys, I got up this morning and saw like the question about the comps in the community. And I got so stoked about like talking about comps, which is one of my favorite things to talk about. I mean, everybody makes fun of me. They're like, why do you like that so much? It's like a terrible part of the querying process. So I'm like, no, I love it. But I thought about it all morning before I sat down to make the video. So I think that's nice to kind of keep your brain going and keeps you in and, keeps things from getting stagnant. Because if you're writing by yourself, sometimes I think that's where you can lose the motivation because it feels lonely. It feels isolating. You hit a roadblock and you just let it stop you. But when you have a community of people around you who are also writing and there's a lot of energy and there's a lot of activity, I think it keeps you motivated.
Yeah. I think the motivation for that is even like subconscious as well. If you think about your why and it is important to you, then when you come to our writing sprints, it's not just that you're there writing and it's not just that you're there moving, like fulfilling your why, but you now have all these other people who are supporting you in your journey as well. When you're in the cafe, it's the same thing. You have all these people that are giving you feedback or interacting with you, and all of it is motivated by the whole reason you're doing this, which is so much more than just writing a story, right? And so you, even if they aren't aware of it, they are supporting you in that, and you feel this connection. And Hank, I think you want to say, I'm getting the vibe of you want to say something off your face, so I'll chime in after that.
I was speaking a minute ago, and I realized my mic was muted. I interviewed Jessie Q Sutanto this morning, and from Jakarta, Indonesia, and she talked about how she was super depressed a number of years ago to the point that she couldn't get out of bed, and she was disappointed in her writing and just felt like there was no movement and just depressed. And she found a community of writers online. And then out of that community of writers, they started doing daily word sprints. And out of those two connections and motivation found through community with others, she now, is writing 3 novels a year. So you can't discount the good that comes from connecting with others, sharing your work, motivating each other. We are social animals, and just because we do an endeavor that is mostly solitary doesn't mean that the other 22 hours a day have to be.
Yeah, I feel like there's this idea that a writer is just by themselves in a room with a typewriter, trying to figure out, how to write the best thing ever, and whatever they clickety clack on that old keyboard comes out just solid gold on a page. That's just not the truth. And in fact, your best story, the best story you could ever tell, is one that you've written, but then you get help from other people perfecting. You get critique partners and beta readers and coaches and editors and all those folks, and your mom and your partner and your best friend giving you encouragement or feedback. Like, it takes a village to really put together the book that you want to have out there, and I think we lose sight of that sometimes. Yeah.
My mom won't read my stuff until it's published. That's what she's told me. So she says I have to keep going so I get published, so she'll read it. I'm like, thanks,
Love. My mom will read my stuff, even though she says it's horrific and not her genre. So and I love her for that.
She's honest. They're all moms are so brutally honest.
There was something here that I wanted to point out. Emily saying, I did actually lose my why and stopped writing for a few years. Have begun writing again, loving it. I love that. But still know I want to dig deeper into the why, because I do think it has changed somehow, and that's bound to happen. Right? Life changes, and so your perspective on things and why you do things will change again. So Emily, now that we know that you actually stopped writing for a few years, I'm going to be extra happy when I see you in our writing sprints and at our other events, because I know you hang out in a lot of them. But I felt the same way. I've talked about my burnout a handful of times now. Like, it's no secret. In 2023, when I couldn't write for half a year, and honestly, I didn't know my why. I didn't know my motivation then, and I wonder if I had known it, if I had been able to come back to writing a little bit sooner. Because at the time, as important as writing is to me now, at the time, the idea of writing a single word was the worst thing in the world.
And which is funny, because your day job was writing related essays and
articles and books.
So you were able to separate that from your creative writing. Like, what kind of gymnastics were you doing in your brain that told you could write one but not write the other?
That's in your head. Anyone who's written nonfiction and fiction, there's different processes that happen. I think, like, you approach them differently. But if I think critically about it, which critical thinking is always a good thing, I can look back and say that my work, my job here at Dabble, has its own why behind it, has its own motivation behind it, because I find fulfillment in this job from helping other people write their books. When I hear that someone has written their book, that is like the shining light that I will hold on to for a very long time. Right? And that's why I wake up and I do this job 40 plus hours a week. And so that was the same as you said before I came on full time at Dabble as the premium community manager or premium content manager. I don't know what you want to call me. Arcane master of the literary arts. Before I came on as that, and I was doing the articles and the ebooks for Dabble, it was the same thing. I'm doing it because I want to help other people achieve their dreams. That's what's important to me. Yeah, thanks for that, Hank. That makes me feel good.
You're welcome, Doug.
All right. Anything else y'all want to mention while we're on this topic? I think it's an important one. I think, we're not going to drag this out for an hour and a half, but I think we've hit some pretty big threads here.
Is it easier? Let me just ask this in a general sense. Is it easier to maintain your why when you publish and people start reading it and you get feedback from people, say they love the thing that you publish? Because the reason I'm asking this particular question is some people get frozen by success. Is that people, they write something, people love it, they comment on it, and then you get this weird voice in your head, and the voices in your head can be crazy, sometimes good and bad. But you get to thinking, well, I can never top that. People expect this, and I don't want to write that again. I want to write something else. And, it can be crippling again. So maybe an addendum to the why question is should your why change? And If so, how do you handle when your why is successful?
That's a great question, because I thought you were going to go the other way. I thought you were going to be like, after you've published, how do you maintain your why when someone gives you a very critical review?
Well, that's the other side of that. But we're looking for sunny outcomes here today.
Yeah, we're saying positive today. It's motivating, but it's also daunting at the same time. I think a lot of writers will be like, don't read your reviews. I know, Hank, you and I, we're review readers. We you can't not do that, right? So I'll read them, and there will be like positive ones, and I love them, and then there will be very specifically positive ones, like, this is I think someone said this is one of the best new authors I've read in a long time, a little while ago. I'm like, that's fantastic. That made my week, right? But at the same time, I just finished the first draft of the third book in my series, and I'm going to start the revision process in a month or two. And the whole time I'm already thinking, what if it's not as good as book 2? Right? What if I know it's better than book 1? Because I'm just better at writing than I was when I wrote my first book. What if it's not better than my last book? Or what if the people who read my urban fantasy books don't like this? Like, there's always that kind of nagging question in the back of your mind, right? But I think if you frame that against why I'm writing to begin with, and I see that there are people who appreciate my writing and find enjoyment and meaning and entertainment in it, that outshines any kind of anxiety, I guess, that I have with it. Imposter syndrome is a real thing, and it's something that I've struggled with multiple times. It's something that a lot of authors struggle with, especially newer authors. But yeah, now going like 5 books out there, writing or finished my 6th, writing my 7th now, it still pops up, right? Still, what if I'm not good enough at this? So you fall back on that why.
Imposter syndrome is something that every writer deals with. Don't let anyone fool you, because the blank page is the great equalizer. Every New York Times bestselling author, when they start a new book, is staring at a blank piece of paper, a blank screen, and the story does not exist until they put their hands on the keyboard and they make it exist. And
just to shift it just a little, though, because probably there are a lot of people here that are either listening or going to be listening who have not published a first book. So like me, they've got a stack of these unpublished books sitting around for whatever reason, whether it's because they are looking for a literary agent, or maybe they're not ready to self-publish, like for whatever reason, or
you don't want your mom to read it, so you
don't want your mom to read it.
Y'all leave mom alone. She's just trying to look out for your best interest.
But there are many people that haven't even finished that first book, and they have a fear that when they do, there's not another book in them. And my heart just goes out to the people who feel that way, because the entire time I wrote my first book, I almost didn't want to finish it, because I thought to myself, I don't have a second book in me. And my coach at the time, I remember when we wrapped up that first book, one of the last things that she said to me was, you have like 100 awesome book ideas in you, like right now, right? And I was like, oh, yeah, I know, put on my big girl panties. Of course I know. But I panicked because I thought, I don't have any more ideas. Like, this is it. I wrote this one thing, and then that's all I have. And I don't have anything else to say. And I think you've kind of hinted at this too, right, Hank? That like when I'm writing a book, I tend to be super focused and like narrowed in. I'm not one of those people that has shiny object syndrome, where like I'm thinking about 17 books all at the same time. The fact that right now I'm thinking about 2 in the same series at a time is like, this is new territory for me, people. Okay. But usually I'm so hyper-focused on that one that I'm not thinking about anything else. And I think if you remember your why and you've learned the process, the second one will get easier because you know what to expect, you know what to do, you know what mistakes you made last time. And I mean, honestly, you make a different new mistake with every book anyway. So, you know, you kind of just have to jump in and learn. But, you know, I think it's a thing, even if you have it published, like you still got to remember your why to
Absolutely.
know you can write book number 2.
I'm a big fan of, and I wrote about this in today's essay that I posted on the Storycraft Cafe, where I was talking about finding your voice. But one way that I encourage people is to start writing on a project that has no expectations and write something completely absurd, just absurdist, just off the cuff. And a lot of times a story idea or a character will emerge in that. And it's something you've been thinking about for a while, but you just couldn't recognize it or didn't allow yourself. But when you take your brain, shift it into neutral and just start writing something, those things will emerge. And little exercises like that can bring out those things. And it doesn't necessarily have to be connected to your why, but in the process of that, your why has a tendency to come out and show itself.
So for those people looking after they finish their project, what was my why? There you go.
Yeah.
You can trick your brain into unlocking it by writing absurd nonsense. I love it.
Right.
I'd build off of that too, in saying that if you think that you can't think of a second story, first, it's okay if you only write one book in your life, right? That's A-okay. Second, I think every author is capable of taking any one idea, and if you understand craft, if you put the work into understanding character development, plot structure, theme, all that stuff, and if you understand why you're doing this, if you have that motivation, then you can take any one idea and slap on the stuff you need for a book afterwards and build out from there. Like Elena pointed out, a great theme from her work in progress. He's learning he's worthy of love no matter what. Fantastic. You can start with that idea. You can start with an idea of, a knight who's down on his luck and exiled from the kingdom. You can start with the idea of a rickety old tower haunted by the ghost of an old grandmother or something. You can literally start with anything. And then that creativity of yours, if you're putting in the work to make it, like, to flex its muscles all the time, then you will start adding on the padding and you'll find a new story. You don't need to think of, okay, what character arc do I need to write this story? Or you don't need to think of what external conflict do I need to carry this story. Just start with an idea and your brain's going to get you there if that's where you want to go.
Yeah. And I love this exercise that Elena talks about. He's learning he's worthy of love no matter what. Well, my imagination can think of a lot of what's. And so, there's a lot of story bound up in that no matter what.
Yeah. All right. I think we are coming up on the top of the hour. I'm going to let us shamelessly plug some events that are coming up this week. Some sad news for the regulars. We only have writing sprints Tuesday and Wednesday this week. Unfortunately, Thursday we had to cancel this time around. However, still Tuesday and Wednesday writing sprints at 12:30 p.m. Eastern, and then back to our 3 times a week next week. What else is going on this week, folks?
Man, tomorrow we have an interview late in the day for us. It's past standard podcast time. It's going to be 5 o'clock Eastern, 4 o'clock Central. And it's with Dean Wesley Smith, who is famous for his writing into the dark method, which is like pantser to the 100th degree. And, we talk a lot about the planning process and, we love plot grids and all of that. And Dean Wesley Smith is here to tell us that is the wrong way to write, or at least that's something that he likes to challenge people to. So it's going to be fun to see how the other half do it, and I'm a big fan of picking people's brain no matter where they are in the process, because there's something I can take away from them. So even though I skew more to the other side, I'm sure there's going to be some nuggets of wisdom there that I can pull from Dean.
Absolutely.
So that's going to be fun. And then, see, that's tomorrow. And then Wednesday, Rosalinda Romaine from the Storycraft Cafe is going to be on with us, talking about how she traveled the world in a sailboat while with her family, and while she wrote a memoir of the experience and is writing thrillers. So that should be a lot of fun.
That's
so exciting.
fun.
Yeah. I still remember when Rosalinda first popped up in one of our writing sprints, because it was like last week or the week before. So it's not like it was that long ago. But but I'm glad she did join us for that.
Yep. It's gonna be a lot of fun.
And we do have, for any Dabble Premium members, we have a special guest workshop this Thursday at 1 p.m. That's from backstory to outline with Shar from the Plottery. Otherwise, that's it. Only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different things going on this week.
Yeah.
All right.
Abby,
Any final words?
What's going on at the cafe this week?
Oh, yeah.
This week, I mean, everything that you guys mentioned. We're talking about comps. I made a little video about comps. Later this month, we have James Wade coming to talk about agents and querying. And then after that, I'm going to do an agent deep dive with everybody and show them how to figure out, is an agent really a good fit for you? I mean, you got to like Scooby-Doo all the clues on the internet to sort of figure out if this person works for you or not, because you do have better response and better luck if you are only really pitching agents that your book is a good fit for. So we're going to do that. But I also told them I would throw in a workshop about comps, which I could talk forever and a day about. So that's going to be coming up as well. I know we're going to do early in March live query edits. And here's the thing, you guys, even if you want to be indie published, come to some of these events, because there's a lot of stuff that we're talking about. You got to know anyway. I mean, your query letter involves the jacket copy. That's like, the part that is on the back of the book right here, which you got to write if you indie publish, right? It's market research.
It's absurdly hard to write that.
It is absurdly hard to write.
It is awful.
My trick was I just paid an editor who had read my book to write it for me. I shouldn't tell people that was what I did, but that's what I did. So anyway, those are some things that are coming up, but we've also got Hank's short story workshops coming up in March, which I'm like, God, we got to start talking about this. I want everyone to come along for the journey. Why is my camera moving? It's because I did that.
Because it's so animated.
I'm going to keep my hands. I'm sorry, I'm Italian. I'm like upstate New York Italian. Like, I mean, I don't know how to talk without my hands. So I'm gonna sit on them. Anyway.
Okay. All right, folks. Well, Abby, Hank, thanks for joining me for this awesome fireside chat. Everyone in the chat, thanks for joining us, sharing your whys and participating. If you're watching afterwards, be sure to drop your why you write in the comments down below. And other than that, we will see you all tomorrow at 12:30 p.m. Eastern for our writing sprints.
Bye, everybody.